Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Gennady Chursev. I'm staff quality assurance engineer. Today we're going to perform mock interview for Michael. Michael, hello.
Hello, Gennady. Nice to meet you.
Yes, so could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. My name is Michael. I work as a software test engineer in about 8 years. The last 3 years, I worked as a QA automation. Regarding my experience as a QA automation, maybe I should divide it into my last working place and current working place. In my last working place, I managed I started automation, test automation from scratch. So I developed test automation framework. I tested Java application based on microservices architecture. During in scope of this auto test, I covered some critical business functional and automated regression testing, basically. Framework used Java 8, JUnit 5, and basically, and Selenium, of course. So it was mostly Selenium tests. On my current work, I do not develop test framework from scratch. My responsibilities are pretty the same, but in addition to the previous work, I develop new tests. I also debug some flaky tests and fix them. And also on current working place, I observe the continuous integration pipelines and searching for some problems during, regression and other. So that's basically my experience.
Okay, thank you for your experience speech. So let's discuss several topics that you mentioned. So you said that you developed your own framework from scratch. Could you please just explain what do you mean by that? From which component it was contained, what you did exactly? Or maybe it will be something like advice how to create a framework.
In my understanding, my framework was based on a page object and page factory pattern. So that basically means that we divide logic of test and the logic how the test steps are implemented. So in separate classes, we define the logic how we interact with elements, and in separate classes, we define basically the logic of the test. So about instruments, as a test framework, I used JUnit 5 as WebDriver. As a tool for browser automation, I used Selenium and sometimes Selenite, but it's other story. As a report tool, unfortunately, we haven't used Allure. We only used the HTML reports which are generated from JUnit, but it was planned to migrate on Allure. What else? That's, I mean, in a nutshell, that's everything.
Okay, is it your framework was done only for UI automation or you covered any API checks?
I was covered only UI checks. It was kind of like end-to-end functional testing, and some other QAs who joined later in the team also covered REST API automation via REST Assured, but I did not participate in this activity. So yeah, talking about me, only Selenium tests.
So your end-to-end scenario was built only from UI steps. It not included any API calls. Is it
Basically,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, but did you have an experience of automation of API scenarios?
Yes, with the JMeter most of the time. It was my experience of API testing. We can divide also into two groups, in some experience in load testing, in some experience in functional testing, but either for both of these activities, I used JMeter. So
Okay.
it wasn't code-based
Okay. For
testing.
example, in our latest project, we are using REST Assured library for Java. Did you
hmm
aware of that library? Do you know how to use it?
Basically, I know the basics of it. What does it do? I think on a basic level, it's not hard to learn how to use it. So uh, fairly saying, I don't have an experience, but I think that's my point of growing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if not, rest assured, like, can you please describe me what will be your steps for automating simple scenario? So, for example, we have an endpoint that can, you, for example, can pass get method to receive, I don't know, all books from the library. You can pass some authentication header,
hmm
and it's returning array of JSON files, like big JSON files with lot of objects that will explain each book as a list. So what will be your automation scenario?
It depends on what actually we test. Does authorization is in scope or just only this get endpoint?
Okay, let's assume that it should be one smoke test just to check that endpoint working. And then we need to check that, for example, it's return real data. So for example, each book is actual data. So probably you need to have some expected value and actual value and need to compare it.
hmm Yes, maybe in our strategy, we don't only have to focus on this get endpoint. In overall test, we should maybe first create some data
Mhm.
to be sure that concrete data is exist already on the server, and we should expect this concrete data by pressing by getting this get endpoint. And maybe after that, we should do some cleanup. If maybe we have 1,000 of this test, not to overload our environment. So basically, yes, create data, retrieve it, and then clean up. Maybe
Okay, okay,
something like that.
but for smoke test, what you're going to check from that API call?
That it is returning some data first, then that it returns real data. Maybe if with get request, we can pass in some parameters also.
Mhm.
Uh, so maybe test how it reacts to parameters. Does it reacts to
And all that
parameters?
things to smoke test, not for extended.
No, I don't think if we have a lot of parameters, we should test all of them. But maybe you're right. For a smoke test, we just retrieve something default, maybe without parameters, if it is possible.
Mhm.
And yes, retrieve the exact data that we are sure that already there.
Mhm. Okay, how you're going to handle that situation? For example, in the precondition step, you using post method to add a new book. I don't know, Howard Lovecraft, Call of
hmm
Cthulhu, or some kind of it. And
hmm
then you're using get, and it's return top 100 books. and your book of Call of Cthulhu inside that list. How are you going to parse that JSON file and check that it contains Call of Cthulhu book in your automation scenario?
Mm. Good question. First variant that comes to the head and then you just just raw search, you brute force everything and one by one and just search the needed. Maybe maybe you should use some binary search algorithms. Maybe if you searched it previously, search this array previously,
Okay, okay.
and then binary search, this would be more efficient. But I suppose your question is not about
Uh,
algorithms of
yeah, it's not
search.
about searching because first, I don't know, task is from JSON to move to some list of Java objects or some kind of it. And then
Uh-huh.
from Java object, you can start searching or something like that. It should
Mm-hmm.
be more easy, I think. So if you add the new book, probably it will be at the end of the list, yeah? So you need to
Oh,
get the last item.
oh, no, now I get it. I get it. Okay, of course. Yeah. Uh, yes, if it's in the last position, yes, then we just get the last element and
Yeah,
compare
yeah.
it to
Can you please explain me? You still don't get it what I wanted to ask. So how to parse from JSON to Java object? Do you know? It's called, it has
this.
specific deserialization or marshalling on marshalling data.
Mm-hmm.
How to do that? Do you know any libraries or approaches?
I know that Jackson library do this task, deserialization or
Hmm.
serialization, but I'm afraid I don't know this in detail. So I just know the
Hmm.
conception from JSON to object and etc. And vice versa, but I won't be able to explain details.
Okay, not explaining details, but uh, for doing that from perspective of automation scenario, you need to create your model or project class. So it means like if your book object has specific, I don't know, fields or etc., you need to firstly create it as a Java class. So it
Mm-hmm.
should be Java class book that contains name, or title, after, I don't know, price, quantity, year of publishing, and etc.
Mm-hmm.
So how you are going to create that project class? Any ideas? Do you have?
Um. mm, well. Uh, I don't. I think I didn't get the question. We just create an object, set all the fields that we required. We set the getters and setters if we needed.
No,
Mm,
but you're going to do it manually or using some specific tool? Like, do you know anything? Because, for example, let's imagine that it has only 5 fields, like that I already mentioned. It will be pretty easy.
uh-huh.
You can just create all that fields. Maybe everything will be string, even year of publishing. Then you
Mm-hmm.
can use Lombok to add like data annotation, and it will create all getters, setters,
Uh-huh.
constructors to string methods, and etc. So it will be pretty fast. But what if that book library contains 100 fields? And inside book library, you have complex objects that after, for example, it's not just string, it's another object that contains name, surname, date of birth, and etc. And inside the publisher, it's also a complex object. For
Mm-hmm.
doing that, there is a specific tools for generating your project classes and even a structure of project classes. Did you try it? Do you know about that? Any
Mm,
experience?
no, unfortunately, no.
Okay, it's not an issue. I just wondering that you have such experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Sorry,
for
by the way,
example,
which concrete tools do you mean?
I'm we can just simply Google it. I'm not remembering the name, but if you will
Mm-hmm.
write something like JSON to Java online tool converter, yeah, there is a site called JSON to
Mm-hmm.
JSON schema to Podge. If you will open it, it's like you need to insert your JSON,
Mm-hmm.
and there is some different toggles. Like, do you need to have, I don't know, two string methods and etc. And then it will
Mm-hmm.
generate Java classes for you that you can copy paste. The
Okay,
one
okay.
thing that you need to keep in mind that if you have some specific data, like it's confident, you cannot use such tool online. But also, as aware, there is a tool inside your machine, so you can do it locally without online tool. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't try it, but it's okay to know to don't know about it. Okay, so we
Okay.
checked it, for example, but what about smoke test, for example? If we are getting a response from any endpoint, usually we're getting response and also status code. Are you going to check status code? And if yes, which one? What you're expecting?
Yes, status code. I think we're gonna definitely check. I think it depends on test. As if it's smoke test, of course it's positive test, and I think it's gonna be 200
Mm-hmm.
status code because it is this request should have a successful answer. So yes, we should check the code as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we speak about HTTP methods, we are mentioned only post and get. Do you know any other HTTP methods?
Yes, get post, put, and delete.
Mm-hmm.
There are also trace,
Not
and
so specific. I
okay,
mean
okay.
something more useful.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's crude. Create, read, delete, and update.
Okay, you mentioned post and patch probably, but you not didn't mention put. Or I
No, put. I
you
think I
mentioned.
mentioned yes before the
Okay,
crude. I said, uh-huh.
okay. Now let's discuss in some details. So if we have post, patch, and put, they all doing something with changing or adding data. Yeah. So why we have so much methods? For example, if we are working with SOAP, like
Mm-hmm.
as other way of communication with API services instead of
Mm-hmm.
REST API, there is only post method. It doesn't even have a get. Why we have such a lot of methods for REST API? Do you have any guess?
Mm, yes, the first guess is something is maybe post method is more used to create some new resources, and put
Hmm.
method is used for more update existing resource.
Okay. And what about patch?
That's I don't remember the specific functions of patch, unfortunately. But I think the conception I mentioned previously is right, maybe.
Yeah, the first you mentioned, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, patch is also using not for creating data, but for updating data.
Mm-hmm.
And also there is a difference between, for example, put and patch, and is that one of that is idempotent method and another one not idempotent
Ah,
method. Do you know what's the difference, like how you're handling that term, idempotency in REST API?
idempotency is a prop. No, this is when you apply some methods multiple times. If the result doesn't change, we can call this method idempotent.
Mhm,
If the result change from first time to others, so we do not call this method idempotent.
mhm. And how it will behave for put and patch? What's your idea? Or maybe with put and post, because post is also different from put. Post is not a idempotent method, and put is idempotent method. So what's the difference between post and put in such case?
Maybe if we try to post something twice, something similar, the application will give us an error, so this resource is already existing.
Mm-hmm.
And put is, as you said, it's important because actually you can infinitely adjust the property, even if it's the same things that
Yeah, yeah.
already in here. So,
Actually, if there is no such resource, it will create it. If it's
mhm,
already exists, it will infinitely I don't know, update that resource.
update, try to update, yeah.
Yeah. And what about HTTP delete method? Do you know something about that? Is it idempotent or not?
Actually, I read about it. Personally thinking, I don't think that it's important because from my perspective, it seems like when you try to delete unexisting things, you should get an error,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not for sure. So if
Ah,
it
yeah.
depends. If you
It's
get an error, then it's not important. And if you don't get an error, it's idempotent.
it's actually a strange thing about delete. It's not like a question here. It's like every time it's used wrongly in services. So I had several projects, and delete method should be idempotent. So if you're trying to delete something that's already deleted, you still should return 200 like it's successfully deleted. But
Mm-hmm.
in real life, every time when I see it in a real project, if you're trying to delete something that already doesn't exist, it will return you an error. So
Mm-hmm.
they are using REST API probably incorrectly, but still you're working with REST API. It's not so strict as SOAP. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you need something that should behave differently from like that rules, you can do that. You can even create the whole service using only post method and it will be working correctly. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
it still will be working, but yeah. So you need to know that delete is idempotent, but
Mm-hmm.
usually in real project, it's not using such.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
let me think more. Probably we covered few things, but uh, speaking about REST API, it's not only one way to communicate. There is also GraphQL. Do you have any experience working with that?
No, I don't have.
I also actually didn't work, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe in your project you need to require such things. So I think for you it will be enough just to read some Wikipedia article about
Mm-hmm.
that. As I know,
Okay.
it has the same difference like SOAP and REST API. It handle only post HTTP method,
Mm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it could be any other things. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
now back return just for quality assurance. So we spoke about your testing framework and etc. But maybe in our projects that you are going to be interviewed, it will be not only one thing that you're going to do, not only to create framework and write automation tests. Sometimes you even need to do something manually.
Mm-hmm.
And to do it, I don't know, the right way, probably you need to know, I don't know, exact stages of developing a product and on which you need as quality assurance engineer do something. So could you please mention all the stages of developing an application and how, as quality assurance engineer, you can work on each one?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the typical iteration of development consists of several steps. I think the very first step is when, let's imagine that you have squad. In squad, you have QA, developers, backend, front end. You have manager. And the first step of iteration is when you on the input of your squad you receive some story or feature. You receive this from let's say business analytics. Previously business analytics met with some business I forgot the word.
Yeah, stakeholders maybe or something like
Yeah, stakeholders. Yeah, and he kind of translated the requirements from this from their language to language that appropriate for the team. Then, if we think in more traditional way, then actually after some planning and estimation, I mean time estimation, we find out how much we will do on how much time we spend on this task, maybe decomposing to subtasks. Development is started, and actually after development we start the testing. This is considering more traditional way. Sometimes on some projects there are some practices like shift left applied. That means that testing involves in more earlier stages. I mean, maybe even before development, developers and QAs make some. Firstly, they discuss and define acceptance criteria. So everybody reviews everybody. So devs reviews tests that we're gonna the behavior that we're gonna implement. Developers reviews testers, testers reviews developers, etc. So everybody reviewing the acceptance criteria that we are gonna be working on, and by the end of this stage, we also define some kind of responsibility metrics, in which we define who automates what. So maybe we have 4 cases, right? And some of them are easily can be automated by backend, and some of them by QA, and maybe some of them by frontend. So yeah, we also define these responsibility metrics, and then everybody starts doing their work, like developers developing. If developing automation tests is required, the implementation to be done, that in this case testers should wait, but after this it's goes more like in traditional way. So developers developed, and then testers are performing some firstly manual tests, then automate, then maybe some exploratory, maybe cross-browser, maybe it's also can be done by hand. And that's actually, no, actually, that's not everything. After this, we assess how much tests are passed, and we decide, did we finished this story? Can we deliver it or consider it to be delivered? I think that's all.
Okay. And what do you think will be entry and exit criteria for, I don't know, let's pick up one stage, like stage of actual testing. What will be entry criteria and exit criteria? You actually already mentioned it somehow, but
yeah, entry criteria for testing is first, we have implementation ready, and it is pushed on some staging, some environment when you can physically test it. Second, we having these test cases or acceptance criteria that's which is known and accepted by everyone from the team. And I think that's all. From that point, we can start do testing. And about exit criteria, criteria of done, I think all the test cases are passed by developers, QAs, and whatever who writes it. And there are no critical bugs that are found during all the testing activities, not only automate, but exploratory and all the other stuff that has been done.
Okay, great. And I also wanted to discuss topics that you started about shift left testing. So you mentioned that you can do it even before actual development, like, I don't know, create test plan, checklist, test cases, and etc. And what else could be? For example, as a quality assurance engineer, can you be able to test requirements? For example, if you have a list of technical requirements, did you had
Yes.
a chance to do that?
You mean actually me or potentially abstractly
yeah,
in this
maybe you
model?
have such experience. If not, maybe you have something theoretical.
Me, actually me, I don't have much experience with testing documentation. We have specifications on my current place of work, but I'm only referring there just to know something, not to adjust it. So, but theoretically, yes, of course, we can imagine a situation where we have, let's say, a day before the implementation from developers will be ready. So then, if we already think and wrote every test cases that we are going to be, I forgot how to be согласовывать, accord.
Like getting approved from other team members?
Yes, that's right. Getting approved from all the members. Yes, theoretically, you may spend some time on documentation testing, or maybe it's not may spend some time. It may be in a must operation. So you kind of have a subtask to do it every sprint, every
Okay,
story.
sure. I think I got it. Okay, but I still didn't hear about, for example, you have one requirement. I don't know, for example, it sounds like your application should be open fast. What do you think about that requirement? Could you be able to test it? Or if not, which specific attributes of good technical requirement it's not met? What will be your decision?
It's not met the requirement that we should be concrete. The maximum concrete in requirements. Firstly, we have to mention how much time does it open now, and which degrees of time we are expecting after the development. So faster.
So I got it. So I got it. So what
Mhm.
actually means word fast in that? So it should be some quantity or seconds or percentage or some kind of, yeah?
Some objective information, right?
Okay.
Or okay.
So we have only 1 minute left, so probably we can finish on that part and rejoin for another one.